a system of belief which posits that God created the world and then abandoned it. Christianity presents a God who is active in shaping the world even today. So how can a world governed by a benevolent and also powerful being contain so much injustice? The seeming contradiction between the attributes of God and the reality of evil gives rise to the question, does God take risks in governing the world?
But what does taking risks entail for God?
In the year 33 AD.
The Messiah! He's gone! Where did he go? Hang on!
Man, you crazy, Jesus! You crazy!
That's what my ex-wife said.
Oh, the son of God! You sure are, son of a...
Chris Tucker and Jim Caviezel? Is that it? The guy from the first one? Passion of the Christ 2. Crucify this. You know how to use one of these?
You know how to use one of these?
This July, let he who is without sin kick the first ass.
We have to clarify what the word risk means, since it opens itself to a lot of interpretations.
The essence of risk-taking is opening oneself to disappointment or surprise. Let's say I have a test and I decided not to study for it. That would mean I'm risking the chance that I would fail the test. So similar to saying that God is a risk taker, that would mean that what he does could result in something that he is not favorable to.
If God indeed took a risk in creating the universe, then he must have created it in such a way that it might turn out different from what he intended it to be. Now, the next question is, how does God do this? How does he take risks?
What's this other jet doing? What's this other jet doing? Holy fuck!
Oh my God! Oh my God! Jesus fucking Christ!
Don't touch it.
Oh my...
Essentially, God takes risks if he endows his creations with libertarian freedom. Libertarian freedom just means that our actions are not predetermined by God.
To quote Hasker, this type of freedom means that an agent of choice is really able, under the same circumstances, to choose differently from what is in fact chosen. Now, this means that nobody determines the choices that we make, and no one, not even God, will know for sure what we're going to do until we actually do the actions that we're going to do.
But can God even take risks? Isn't risk-taking being surprised or frustrated against his nature?
God has three what we call omni-attributes: omnipotence, omniconscience, and omnipresence. When we talk about the risk-taking God, the attributes that are brought into question are his omnipotence and omniscience. If he is all-powerful, why does he actively control the will of his creations? And if he's all-knowing, why doesn't he know absolutely what we'll do in the future?
To answer this, you have to understand that omnipotence doesn't mean that God can do absolutely everything, even if we consider a non-risk-taking God. It means that God can do everything except the things that are logically impossible or are in conflict with his perfect nature.
For example, God can make a rock so big that he can't lift it. A rock is made out of matter, which means that it occupies both space and time. And the process of lifting something entails of moving it from one point in time to another point in time. Now, if God is to create a rock so huge that it is unmovable, it means that it has to occupy all of space and time. The problem is, space and time is infinite, which means for something to be unmovable, it has to occupy an infinite amount of space and time, which is a problem because if a rock is infinite, that must mean it's eternal, and a rock that is eternal is not a rock. Where the question asks God to both create a rock and not to create a rock. It is a self-contradiction. That's why God can do it.
The same goes for God's omniscience. This means that God knows all there is to know. Therefore, if God doesn't know it, then it doesn't exist to be known. If God endowed His creations with libertarian freedom, then He'll have exhaustive knowledge of the future. If the opposite is true, then God will not have exhaustive knowledge. In any case, both His omnipotence and omniscience are not invalidated if God takes a risk.
The limitations of God, if He takes a risk, does not concern His essential attributes, but rather the style of governance He decides to use. Because of this, it can be said that it is not against the nature of God to take risks.
So what type of universe did God create? Did He endow us with libertarian freedom, or is our freedom a mere illusion and that it is in fact God who makes our choices for us? To answer this question, let us take a look at the world that God has created.
It is filled with a slew of pain and suffering. Poverty, war, and other injustices are as ubiquitous in our world as the presence of God. Is this the world God wills? In the no-risk alternative, it must be, since God is the one who actively controls the choices of His creations.
Also, if our choices are determined by God, then how come He's happy when we do something good and disappointed when we do otherwise? If God doesn't take risks, then is it not reasonable to think that He is ultimately responsible for the sins of His creation?
I believe that God takes risks, simply because the alternative doesn't present any satisfactory explanation on how we can absolve God from the responsibility of evil and sin. If God knowingly and deliberately places His creations in situations that might lead them to sin, then the moral responsibility is transferred to Him with some qualifications. In the with-risk position, however, the libertarian freedom afforded by God to us effectively disconnects Him from the responsibility of a morally abhorrent act. It is also provided us with an explanation of how it is possible that God rewards good deeds and punishes wrongdoing.